So many of you have actually attended the Crypto Summit. That was back in May. And we talked about the risks of digital assets back then and how to protect vulnerable communities. You remember that? All right. Well, I think we're on to a little something because all things have changed since then. We brought in some of the country's leading experts to actually give us the lowdown on where we are now. Comptroller of the Currency, the Honorable Michael Hsu, and the man that knows all about it, Mr. John Hope Bryant. Let's welcome them to the stage.
Are you guys enjoying the night? I am so excited. Dr. King, his last book was Where Do We Go From Here? And people forget that in the 13 years that Dr. King was in this movement, every day was not a I have a dream speech. Most of it was boring staff meetings and conference meetings and going to parent-teacher night and going to the grocery store. And he probably gave this I have a dream speech 100 times. Andrew Young tells me before the March on Washington. The one time that it all came together we remember. But they don't realize all the other things that really took the moment to its moment, made the moment possible. It was all the background work. Where do we go from here on cryptocurrency, on technology, fintech, and specifically you and I had a conversation about 6 months ago on this stage at the first ever cryptocurrency summit of its kind. And people call me a bit of a poo-poo person when it came to crypto, and I wasn't. My wife has crypto, and I, full disclosure, I have an account just so I wanted to be able to track it and understand it. But I just felt that it was being mismarketed and misused by some, and the largest group of folks picking up cryptocurrency were black people. Poor, struggling, black and brown people using their rent money for something I thought was very risky. And you and I sat on this stage and had a conversation, and I want the audience to know this is the first federal regulator. Michael, the Comptroller, regulates $15 trillion in banking assets. So 70 cents of every dollar in the banking system in the largest economy in the world is regulated by this man. And he took the time and took, I think, professional risk in putting his foot down, the only federal regulator, at least the first one, to say, I have concerns and I want to protect people. Can you just, before we do anything else, just say thank you to Michael Hsu. So 6 months later, where are we? What have we discovered?
So I think what we're learning now is that gravity is asserting itself. Crypto has been long on hype, short on discipline. And in any industry, that's an issue. In an industry where you're handling other people's money, that's a really big issue. And so we're seeing that play out now. And I think that there's more to come. There's more to come.
We gave some warnings at a time where hype was at a zenith.
Yep.
What's happened in the last 3 months specifically that concerns you?
Well, so maybe just to go back for a moment. So 1 year ago from today, crypto was probably $2.5, $3 trillion total market value. Bitcoin was probably $60,000. And everybody was feeling FOMO. Everyone was feeling that there's someone out there making a lot of money on this. Should I get in? And I think everyone was chasing. And it was hard not to. But I think with matters of money, you got to take a hard, cold, sober look and say, what are the risks? What's the upside? What's the downside? And is there discipline? Is there discipline that's being exercised? And I think in that space, there's very little discipline. I think you're seeing some of the effects of that now.
So one thing you told me when we were talking at lunch about 8 months ago was there were, if I'm getting this wrong, there were thousands of cryptocurrencies.
Yep.
Is the number 20,000? What was it?
I mean, it depends on how you count them, but it was well over 10,000.
Well over 10,000
tokens of various
total of different tokens. And what percentage failed?
I mean, so now you're going to stretch me. Like, a lot of them have failed. Some of the biggest ones, really, the cracks started appearing this past spring with the Terra Luna stablecoin, which was not stable, collapsing, and then that taking down other things with it, and then most recently with FTX.
And there were some marketers who were suggesting that these crypto, this is really fascinating, cryptocurrency was created, if you don't know this, right in the backdrop of the subprime mortgage crisis of 2009, where there was a lot of people, rightly so, upset with Wall Street. And I've always said, whatever decision you make emotionally is a bad decision. And there were some emotional money movements that were a pushback against Wall Street and banking, saying, we lost our money somehow in this subprime crisis, so now we're going to create an alternative system that has no connection to Washington, to the dollar, to banks. That's where this came from. Now I find it fascinating that certain marketers were then saying, we are FDIC insured or backed, or we're backed by the US dollar. Am I mistaken about this?
No, you're exactly right. So, but John, I think it's important. Your first point is really important. There has been mistrust of the traditional banking and financial system for some time. And that mistrust is not entirely misplaced. So you mentioned the 2008 financial crisis. That was a huge source of the mistrust. But even before that, for communities of color.
The Freedmen's Bank.
Right, Freedmen Savings Bank, we've talked about that. For communities of color, for the underserved, the traditional banking system has not necessarily been there for them. And either you've got redlining, you've got predatory lending, so there's reason for folks to have been skeptical and to want to look for something else. So I think that needs to be acknowledged.
Yeah.
And like you said, Bitcoin gets created in 2009, coming out of the ashes of peak mistrust of the financial system.
And I think it's no coincidence, Mr. Comptroller, that the very group that was discriminated against or taken advantage of or not taken care of from the Freedmen's Bank on forward, and which includes, by the way, understand that redlining didn't come from banks. The word redlining came from, I think it was FHA, in the early 20th century, refused to finance or guarantee mortgages in black neighborhoods. And because the government refused to guarantee the mortgage in the black neighborhood, the bank wouldn't lend on the mortgage in a black neighborhood. You follow me? It's really important to understand this. So the banks went, capital's a coward. The banks went where the money was safe. The banks went to where the white neighborhoods that had the FHA guarantee and away from the black neighborhoods, which made the black neighborhoods drop in asset value. That was the government that was actually facilitating, at that time, redlining. And the banks didn't lend in those areas. So you have the Freedmen's Bank, you have the FHA crisis, and a number of other things, subprime mortgage crisis, that makes blacks and brown people skeptical. So who then do cryptocurrency promoters go targeting with an emotional response that this is going to be the one time that you're going to get rich? Black folks. And I'm with Malcolm X right now. You've been bamboozled, you've been tricked, you've been fooled. And I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. So to Dr. King's quote, where do we go from here? How do we create a system of trust? What are the things that you're doing and the regulatory framework is doing? We called for regulation at our meeting. We said that this is actually better for the industry, for legitimate cryptocurrency. By the way, I believe blockchain is a legitimate technology. I believe that crypto will have a place in the future. I just don't think it's what we're talking about right now, and it's certainly not a get-rich-quick scheme. I believe there's a future of fintech and all of that. And we're going to talk about that more in a moment. But we also we said that they're going to do better in a regulated environment as will the consumer, than an unregulated environment. Where do we go from here?
So for me, I have to start and finish with the national banking system,
Yep.
like you said. So my objective, national banking system has to be safe, sound, and fair. Number one, number two,
Safe, sound, and
fair. If it's safe, sound, and fair, it'll be trusted, and it'll be there for folks. It's very important that the banking system is there to work for folks, all folks, everybody. You got to get on the ladder of economic progress. You got to be able to get on, and banks are part of getting onto that. And banks have gotten better at this. There's still room to grow,
Yep.
still room to improve, but that's got to be job number one. That trust has to be earned, and that trust has to be earned over time. Now, in terms of crypto, I think crypto started off, the premise was you don't need trust, right? The blockchain technology was built on this idea they don't want to deal with banks. They just want to do it in a trustless way. I think we've realized that's impossible. You have to trust somebody. So if you have to trust people, how do you operate in a way? And that's why some crypto firms would wave around FDIC insurance. They would wave around, hey, we're super regulated, when they weren't, because they're trying to borrow the trust from somewhere else. Don't borrow it, earn it, get it.
That's right.
Right? So we have a system right now where if the company wants to apply for a national bank charter and earn that trust, the door is open. But they have to abide by our standards.
That's right.
Safe, sound, and fair. We're not going to cut any corners, and that's what makes the national banking system trustworthy. So I think that conversation is now taking place in crypto. They're trying to figure out how do we earn that trust? And I think that it has to be earned. I don't think there's no shortcuts.